Hello everyone. 80 years ago today, on the 27th of January 1945, Allied troops came to where I am standing and discovered the horrors of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration and extermination camp. Here, 1.1 million men, women and children were killed. During the Second World War, more than 6 million people were murdered in what is known as the Holocaust. And today is Holocaust Memorial Day, commemorating those victims, the vast majority of whom were Jews. There are going to be events taking place all over the world. We've seen some already, but the main focus will be here at Auschwitz in southwestern Poland. The weather here, well, it is clear. It is close to freezing, though very, very cold. That hasn't discouraged, though, around 50 survivors. They're getting old now. They're in their 80s, in their 90s as well. You can see them here supported by friends and relatives very early this morning when they came to lay wreaths at what is known as the Black Wall, sometimes called the Death Wall. When I did my tour, that's what my tour guide called it. It stands between two blocks of the former concentration camp. For some, the people that you see here, this could be the last time that they're able to visit in memories of those who did not survive. And you can see there Poland's President Duda. He laid a wreath today and said it was the job of his country to preserve the memory of Auschwitz in order to never let it happen again. President Duda, just one of many world leaders who are going to attend the commemorations today. Among them as well, King Charles, who will pay his respects on behalf of all of the people that he represents. Let's give you a very brief reminder and a brief history of what happened here at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Auschwitz, also known as Auschwitz-Birkenau, opened in 1940. It started as a concentration and labour camp, but was transformed into the Nazis' most notorious extermination camp. It was built on the site of a German army barracks in occupied Poland. Auschwitz was the largest of approximately 44,000 concentration camps and ghettos created across Nazi-occupied Europe and North Africa during World War II. The Nazis, under the orders of Adolf Hitler, deported Jews from all over Europe to Auschwitz. They were rounded up and spent days travelling in cattle carts. Roma, communists, homosexuals and Soviet prisoners of war too. Many died on the way. When they arrived at the camp, families were split up. Men, women, mothers and fathers were separated from their children. The elderly and the youngest were murdered on arrival. Those deemed fit enough were put to work, stripped of everything: their own clothes, glasses, shoes, jewellery. Their heads were shaved. The guards removed any kind of personal identity and human dignity. Approximately 1.1 million people were murdered at Auschwitz. They would die from disease, starvation, executions, beatings, or being sent to the gas chambers. Nearly 1 million were Jews. Why? This was part of the Nazi Holocaust and final solution, the plan to eliminate all Jews simply because of who they were. On the 27th of January 1945, the Soviet army began entering Auschwitz and liberated some 7,000 prisoners, most of whom were ill or dying. It was then that the true horror was unveiled. It's commemorated as International Holocaust Remembrance Day worldwide. World leaders are arriving here in Auschwitz, among them Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who we can show you some pictures of now. He has been in Kyiv today at a commemoration service and now here in Auschwitz, saying that the world must prevent evil from winning. A reminder, though, Vladimir Putin did attend the 60th anniversary. He is not welcome here now. There'll be no Russian presence because of the full-scale war launched against Ukraine 3 years ago, even though the camp, when we think about the 80th anniversary, was liberated by the Russian-dominated 60th Army of the First Ukrainian Front. So let's talk about that with Jeremy Hicks, who is professor at Queen Mary University and also the author of the first film of the Holocaust. Very good to have you with us, Jeremy. This video that a lot of people will remember, because when you think about what happened at Auschwitz, it is so valuable, the pictures and the video shot by the Red Army. Can you give us some context as to how it was filmed?
Yeah, thanks. Well, the Soviets had been filming Nazi atrocities, the violence inflicted against their own people, particularly in occupied Ukraine, occupied Belarus, and the small parts of Russia that were occupied, and they've been filming that since 1941, and that included filming the aftermath of the Holocaust in places like Kharkiv in Kiev, in Ukraine. So they'd been filming this to create a kind of propaganda narrative of vengeance, but also to create a record of Nazi crimes for a possible future war crimes tribunal that all belligerents thought could happen at the end. So when they came to Auschwitz at the beginning of 1945, they also filmed this, but they weren't entirely sure what to make of it. It was hard for them to get their heads around precisely what had happened. And they filmed things such as they filmed the extent of the Jewish victimhood. For example, they filmed piles of ritual Jewish prayer shawls, talis, but they didn't put that out in the final film. And they dithered around with this film for many months and only released it shortly after victory in May 1945.
But Jeremy, did they stage some of the filming as well?
Yes, that's right.
Outtakes, I know, that show some people even cheering.
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, it's of course all documentary film has an element of staging, and in that period in particular, that was the case. But they filmed more than they ended up using, and they filmed a scene of the inmates where they got the inmates to sort of cheer as the Red Army arrived, and even they realized that was ridiculous and beyond the pale. Some of the staging, though, you could say was done for understandable and justifiable reasons. They wanted to film what life was like inside the barracks in Auschwitz, but they hadn't. The frontline cameraman didn't have lighting apparatuses, any kind of lighting, and obviously in the kind of film conditions of the time, you needed light to film inside, and so they had to sort of basically order that before they could film inside the barracks.
Jeremy, can I ask you, Vladimir Putin is not here today. There'll be no Russian presence here today. What is the narrative around the Holocaust now in Russia?
So yes, Vladimir Putin he's in Leningrad, in what was Leningrad during the war, but St. Petersburg today. And he made a statement where he lists he talks about the Holocaust, but he has a sort of a list of the victims of the Holocaust are Jews, Russians, and Gypsies, Roma Sinti. And so the Soviets in 1945, they didn't really like to recognize the extent of the Nazi anti-Semitism and the targeting of Jews. They underplayed that, downplayed that enormously. But now they accept that. But then they put Russians just after that. So they try to emphasize anti-Semitism and Russophobia. As people will know, the Russians have exploited the memory of World War II and the Holocaust to justify their invasion of Ukraine, because they're defending, in their own terms, they're defending the Russian-speaking, or as they think of it, as Russian population of eastern Ukraine. And so, yeah.
Jeremy, we need to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you with us. Mary Forbrook is still with us, Professor of German History. Mary, not sure if you were able to hear what Jeremy was saying, but I think one of the things that is so staggering for people when they come here is that you are told that there are actually 44,000 concentration camps and ghettos throughout Europe, and the focus for most people is often this place where we are standing now at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Why is that?
Well, this is the epitome, the epicenter of evil. This is the most concentrated node and nexus of evil because it had everything. It was an extermination center with the dedicated gas chambers and crematoria in Birkenau and the gas chamber here in Auschwitz I, right behind me. It also had a network of sub-camps, labour camps. People were chosen, they were selected, that famous word on the ramp by Josef Mengele and others, selected to go either one side straight to the gas chambers or the other side to slave labour. And so it fulfilled a multiplicity of functions. And because people were deported to here from across the whole of Europe, many, many different nationalities came together here. And because there were so many sub-camps, labour camps, there were a remarkably high number of terribly small, but compared to other extermination centres, a relatively high number of survivors. If you think of the dedicated killing centres, Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Chelmno, they had very, very few survivors, only a tiny handful from Chelmno, a couple from Belzec, a few dozen from Treblinka and Sobibor, whereas this had a lot more survivors from the multiplicity of sub-camps, labour camps, other camps around. And so Auschwitz has become internationally known because there are survivor testimonies in so many different languages in the post-war period. So it is really important as this symbolic concentration of all the things the Nazis were doing. But the danger, if we focus solely on Auschwitz, important as it is that we lose sight of that much wider spread, as you've mentioned, of the innumerable labour camps, small ghettos, larger ghettos, other concentration camps across Europe. More dense in some areas than in other areas. There are far more of them in certain parts of Europe than other parts of Europe. But we have to understand that wider system if we're going to understand how people got to here. This was, in a sense, almost the last killing centre. The Reinhardt camps were earlier. But killings, violence, exploitation, stigmatisation, discrimination were carried on all the way through the pre-war period and from the very start of the war onwards, before the Nazi treatment of Jews turned into what they called the final solution of their self-developed Jewish question.
Mary, thank you so much.
So I think we have to put Auschwitz in a much wider context.
We will be back with you throughout the day, and I hope you can stay with us for our continuing coverage here at Auschwitz.